Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Angel R Talk, and today I am speaking with a former colleague. This one's interesting because this is a person I actually worked with down when I was in Wall Street, who is running for public office now.
The city of New York, Boricua from the Bronx.
Tamara, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what your background is, what you're running for, because I have to be entirely honest. I don't know all the political positions in the city. And I think most people will think it's president, Congress, Senate, governor, mayor, and they don't care about any of the other ones. But the truth of the matter is that those are the ones, those lower positions on the state and city level are the ones who affect us more directly.
Yes.
So please tell us, share with us, please.
Yes. Well, they all actually affect us. Even things on the federal level affect us.
Of course.
This is certainly a lot more local. So hello, everyone. My name is Tamara Laschyk, and I am running for New York State Assembly in New York's District 66, which includes East Village, West Village, Soho, and Tribeca. My background has been 26 years in financial services. I worked in various different roles, which is how I know Angel. I left Wall Street last year in order to pursue other opportunities, which includes starting a business, a career coaching business. So I am now an entrepreneur and building a coaching business. And what was interesting was last year I won, I was nominated for the Woman of Wall Street Award, and I got seated next to a woman who was running for Congress. And we spoke about politics all night long. And I told her, some ideas and visions that I had for our federal government. And by the end of the evening, she encouraged me to run for Congress. And she had given me her card and said she could introduce me to, the necessary people to get that launched. I decided that it wasn't a good time for me because I was focusing on building my own business. And so we kind of put a pin in it, although I've always been very interested in politics and could always envision myself having a political future. Then in October, I was having dinner randomly at a restaurant in Midtown and ran into the same woman and had asked her if she remembered me. And she said she did and said, hey, we're having a donor dinner and let me introduce you to some political players in the New York scene. And so I met them. We just briefly chatted, just like you would meet somebody at a cocktail party. You don't really think too much of it. And they took some of my information down. And in January, they reached back out to me and asked me to run for Congress. So they brought me in and interviewed me, asked me some of my political views, and were very impressed with both my background and my knowledge about government, and said that they wanted to endorse me. But again, it wasn't the right time for me because I was still really much building my business. So I turned them down, and they came back to me and asked me if I would run for state assembly. And that seemed a lot more doable, that I could set up my business in a way where my time is spent minimally on my business and much more focus is placed on this role in state assembly. So I felt like it was a very good opportunity because it would also give me an entree into politics, and I would learn how to run a political campaign. And then I could decide whether or not I want to pursue, which is pursue a career in an area that seems like it is quite a shit show.
Yeah. But you're running as a Republican in New York City. What's that like?
Yeah. So I have been a Republican since I was 18 years old, and I'm a very moderate Republican.
What does that mean? Like what does like moderate Republican, like, can you explain that for someone who, most of the people that are going to listen to me are going to be Democrats, right? And they're automatically going to think that you're a certain type of person with certain type of views just because you have Republican. But
Yeah.
you say moderate Republican. Can you explain that to them so that they understand what we're?
Yeah. I mean, it generally means that the policies that I support aren't really extreme to the right. So my main issue with being a Republican is I believe in fiscal conservatism. Although the Republican Party over the last, I would say, decade or so hasn't really displayed much fiscal conservatism. Now, on social issues, I am pretty liberal, which again pulls me sort of towards the middle. And I would venture to
Hmm.
say that I have more in common with moderate Democrats than Democrats or Republicans have of the wings of either of our parties. So our views
Hmm.
are just not really extreme. They're very close to center, which is where most of the country really falls into. So, but going back to what I was saying, so I've been a Republican since I was 18 years old,
Hmm.
and it only recently has become toxic to become a Republican. Now, there are things that the Republican Party has done that I don't necessarily support, and rather than jumping ship, I do plan on bringing reform to the Republican Party. I do think that the Republican Party needs to modernize. I think that there's, an issue that's near and dear to my heart has been women's issues, which were some of the topics that I discussed with this woman who's running for Congress, and really urged her to bring a more female-focused agenda to Congress, because I think that while the economy is an issue that everybody cares about, there are issues that are specific to women that the party hasn't really done a good job with addressing. So I would like to bring some of those issues into if I were to run for Congress, I would like to bring some of those issues into government. Um, so yes, so in terms of what's that like and what's that about, I mean, most people who meet me and know me know that I'm very fair and balanced. And I am open to hear perspectives from anybody, quite honestly. And I I'm not so dug in to every one of my beliefs, and have always been very empathetic, and have always been able to sort of see both sides of every argument. And, some of the laws that we have in place don't really apply necessarily to the way life really works today. So where they need amending and updating, I'm very open to hear everybody's perspective.
You say you want to get New York on its feet. I was looking through your website and I saw that often being referenced. So how does that actually happen?
First of all, the role of the state assembly is not unlike Congress, but at the state level.
I
So
see.
what the state assembly does is it legislates and writes laws. It also does have some influence over budgeting as well. Um, so quite honestly, the way they function together, um, it does make making an impact challenging, because there are certain things that you're responsible for as an assembly person, or as the state assembly is responsible for, and sometimes it might not have the direct influence. Now, that being said, I've already been working with business owners and restaurant owners and talking to them about a plan. What I would like to do when I win is take the needs that businesses have and bring them to the floor, and see if we can get legislation passed in order to help support these businesses so they don't go under, and that they could rebuild and once again thrive. Now, that's going to be challenging because you see what they're up against. And there's going to be a lot of businesses. There are already a lot of businesses that have closed down, never to reopen again.
Right.
So we have to really also try to incentivize new businesses to come in. But in order to do so, we want to make sure that our laws are business friendly. And it is challenging to do business in New York. It's a very expensive city. And the condition that it's in now, arguably, you're not getting any real bang for your buck. So it doesn't really behoove businesses to necessarily move to New York. So you have to really be creative with how you incentivize. There also has to be some laws, you know, some liability, some business liability laws that give protection to businesses. You know, we're a very lawsuit happy society, and
Mhm.
you can't have people walking into a restaurant thinking that they might have gotten COVID there, or, you know, maybe they got it at a store next door that they popped into, or they went to a friend's house that might have had COVID, not really be able to accurately trace where they've gotten COVID, and then they go and they sue the restaurant. I mean, we can't really have that. I mean, that's just going to really be detrimental to our local economy, and it's just going to put undue strain on businesses. So,
It also seems very unfair because you don't know where you really could have got COVID riding the train. You could have you could be the one spreading it. You know, it just seems unfair. It's with such an unknown thing. You know, it's not like if I'm standing in a restaurant and I slip and fall, it is unquestionable that I was hurt at your restaurant because you didn't put up a sign that says wet floor or whatever. That's a very clear cut, very simple thing. Whereas COVID is this invisible thing that can be anywhere. Just seems unfair. I'm inclined to agree with that. You know, just seems like it would be unreasonable to be able to. First of all, I don't even know how they would prove that. How do you prove that? How do you prove that you didn't already? And I don't mean to sound insensitive or attack anyone who's gotten sick. Obviously, that's clearly not the intent. But if you're trying to blame it on someone and financially benefit from that, you know, even on aside from a business level, you can meet me tomorrow for lunch, get sick, and say I made you sick, and
yeah.
sue me. That's. But you're correct. We live in a very people can sue you for anything. You know,
Yeah.
they can sue you for everything. So that's kind of rough.
Do you remember a few years back, or many years back now, where the woman went to McDonald's and she had that scalding hot cup of hot coffee that she put between her legs, and then
Oh,
it spilled and she got burned. I mean,
I do remember. But
crazy what people sue for. But the thing is
didn't
that
she win that though?
I think she won it. Yes, I
I
do.
kind of feel like she won that lawsuit, and then they made different changes to try to address that. But
I do think she did win it. I do think she won that
that's
suit.
that's a
Of course, she
tough one
received a
because
settlement. But
mm,
anyway, we do need protection for our small businesses, but I wouldn't necessarily extend that same protection to major corporations. For example, I would be weary about, you know, the large hotel chains. And the reason I would be weary and skeptical about them in particular is, look, you and I both worked for corporations, and we
mm,
know how corporations tend to cut corners, and they need to, you know, make sure that they are not cutting corners and that they remain compliant. And if they have that protection, they are likely to abuse it. So I would be
right.
I wouldn't be supportive of extending that to corporations. And I would be, if it were extended to corporations, I would be very vigilant about the monitoring of that. But I do think for small businesses, for sure.
Yeah, it does make sense. I I've been to hotels in the past where oh, as a matter of well, no, I don't want to name anything. I don't want to do anything. I've been to a location on a trip during COVID, and there was used soap left over in the room. There was hair on the toilet, okay? And I don't know what that was, but let's just say it was hair on the toilet, hair in the bathtub, and used products, toiletries.
Mm-hmm.
It looked to me like this bathroom wasn't cleaned. Now, if there's hair in there, like shaved hair, I don't know where it comes from, hair on the toilet, on the bathtub, and use soap. Clearly, this room wasn't cleaned.
Yeah.
If I can visually see these items, then imagine what I can't see. You know, so I called them up and they said, okay, we're going to come and clean the bathroom. I said, no. I want you guys to clean this whole damn room as if it wasn't cleaned. And I'm going to hang out while you guys do it. I apologize if I sound rude, but, oh no, we changed the sheets. Well, how do I know that?
Yeah.
You didn't even clean the toilet and you let me see it. It wasn't even like an attempt to mask it. So if that's happening, I don't know if they have protections or not, but imagine if you protect them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that would be just, I couldn't believe it. And this was during COVID.
Oh,
This
really?
was during COVID.
Wow.
This is why it blew my mind. I called them and they were nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll send somebody to clean it. I was, you guys understand what I'm saying to you? You know, and I generally I expose things like that on my blog and on my platforms. I didn't do it because I'm trying to be more of a good person and helping people improve, but they got to do better, you know.
Yeah.
Getting New York on its feet, right? One thing I've noticed back on, also connected to COVID, is that since COVID happened, I feel like New York City is starting to feel more like it did in the 80s. I will attribute that to I will call our fearless leader in the mayoral position. But would you agree with that? And what
So
would
you're talking about before Giuliani took over?
correct? I'm talking about, yeah. So even Giuliani right now to me is kind of crazy. I don't like to speak much on that guy of today. But one thing I will say, that I believe that anybody who's honest, right, is honest and truly speaks reality, would acknowledge that we had Koch, we had Dinkins. During that period, New York City was crazy. Then we got Giuliani, and again, I am not advocating for the guy. I know he did things that may not have been great for communities of color, where I grew up in the poorer neighborhoods and stuff. But despite that, it must be acknowledged, if you are honest, that when Giuliani came in, crime went down. The gangs started to hide. The shootings became less. New York City got cleaned up. It just can't be denied. No one can deny that. I have a hard time reconciling that, because I feel like there were things that were done that hurt our communities that maybe shouldn't have been done. Fathers were taken away from families that maybe didn't have to be. But a lot of those people that they did take away had to be taken away. And even simply walking the street as a kid, I grew up in the South Bronx, and this was when I was a teenager. During the 80s and early 90s, before Giuliani came in, the streets were wild. There were gangs everywhere. I would see them with the colors on. There's no discretion. They were out there. We're hanging out. I'm not going to say any names, because again, I'm not looking to get stabbed or shot. But they were out there. Giuliani came in. Now they started to be discreet. They were still around. I still knew someone. Hey, what's up, brother? You know, but they were being discreet. Things changed. There was a clear change. Times Square changed. Obviously, there was a time where our joke would be, you know, your mother works in 42nd Street.
Yeah.
And that didn't mean that she worked at Disney. It meant she had a different career. That was our childhood diss to our friends. Your mom works at 42nd Street, and it had an entirely different meaning. Oh, well, actually, she does. She works at the Disney store. That's not what we meant when we said it back then. He changed that. You know, when Bloomberg came in, I feel like we were kind of just maintaining the status quo. I didn't feel that things got horrible. Things were getting worse. And then this guy comes in, and all of a sudden, I feel like we're backtracking. We're not quite there just yet, but I feel like we're backtracking.
We're not not quite there, but I grew up in New York. I think I'm a little bit older than you. I grew up in New York in the 70s, and we used to live in the East Village, and it was utterly it was unsafe. I mean, I remember walking out, walking into our lobby of our building. We lived in a tenement building, and there were a lot of homeless people sleeping in that lobby, and
Wow.
they were urinating and defecating literally in front of me. And I was a little girl, and I remember my mother. My mother was not a very aggressive or assertive woman, but she was pretty horrified, and she would sometimes yell at them, like, "What are you doing? Like, you're doing this in front of my daughter. My daughter's a child. Like, what is wrong with you?" And I
Oh,
distinctly remember, those memories, having to step over homeless people that are sleeping in our lobby. And it was, like I
wow.
said, it was unsafe. And then when we had moved to New Jersey, my entire family continued to live in the East Village. So we would always come into the city and spend time with them and have holidays with them. And I used to come into the city all the time as a teenager as well. And anytime you would drive into the city, I knew where to park, which was always by the police station on Fifth Street. But if you didn't park on Fifth Street, you could guarantee that your car would get broken into. And we knew the drill. You wouldn't leave anything in the car. You
Mm.
couldn't leave something in the seat, on the front seat of the car, and then park it and then take it out and put it in the trunk, because you would be seen putting it in the trunk, and then your trunk would get broken into. You'd literally have to clean your car before coming into the city, making sure there was nothing visible. They would break into your car for a dime. Like, if there was a dime on the seat, it would get broken into. It was
Wow.
really, truly unbelievable. And then you'd be able to buy the things that were stolen from you on Second Avenue. Okay, so
I,
at 4 o'clock in the morning, when you're coming in from the bar, I remember my ex-husband had his car broken into, and they stole a tennis racket, and literally the tennis racket was being sold there. So I do remember, if the city were as safe as it was under Giuliani and Bloomberg, I don't know that my parents would have left the city. I think that
Mm.
they would have probably raised us in the city, but it was too unsafe. So, we actually moved to a suburb in Newark. And, but I did return to New York City because of the work that Giuliani and Bloomberg had done. Now, I've read books on Giuliani. I tend to agree with you in terms of, him. I would disagree with you on, you said he's become a little crazy. I think he's always had that in him, that little bit of crazy.
Oh, mm.
Because again,
I
growing
was
up,
too young back then to really. I didn't really follow any political stuff, and I can only remember the change I saw on the street, and it was during that era. So I reference him then. So I didn't see him speak back then. I never saw anything. I only see him now, and he looks
yeah.
like he's wacky now.
No, yeah, and I didn't see him speak back then. But what I will reference is, growing up as a teenager under his administration, I, always believed New York was a free frontier. So, there was times where you would come and you'd be hanging out with your friends sort of on a stoop somewhere, drinking beer in a bag, and police would come up to you and they would confiscate it and they would pour it out in front of you and things like that. So I felt like those policies were a little bit extreme, but this was from a perspective of a young rebellious teenager who, wanted to come to the city to party. And he was infringing on my party. Now, as I got older and I saw how well he did in terms of cleaning up the city, I started to get very curious, and I did read a few books on what he did and how he did it. And another thing is, driving into the city, you would get, you would get the window washers that would come up to your car, and they would
Right.
spit on your car, and they would, use a dirty rag to wash your car and stuff. And at times they got a little bit aggressive too. And, one of the
I
things
remember that.
he did was he took them off the street. And when he started arresting them, he started to see that they had pretty long rap sheets. And when he started to arrest people for misdemeanors, he would see that they would have you know, much more of a rap sheet than just, you know, hopping the turnstiles. So by him taking a hard stance on some of the misdemeanors, he actually was able to capture a lot of the felonies and the violent felons as well. So yeah. And as for some of the social issues that you raise, you know, I mean, you know, right or wrong, I just think it's very difficult to go back and judge by today's standards. You know, I mean, we're seeing that all over the country in terms of, you know, tearing down our statues. You know, for good or bad, this is our history, and revising it and scrubbing it.
Right.
What is
No,
truly the benefit of that? You
no,
know?
I don't agree in revising it. Um, I I believe we should know it. Um, I feel like those statues would be better served in a museum where people can still go and see them and see the historical context rather than maybe out in people's faces where maybe it's a community that was ill-treated by this person. And the, you know, it all depends on the specifics. Like I don't know all the statues throughout the United States, but I certainly don't believe in changing the history. I don't i don't think we should. I mean, if we're judging people by what they said in the past, I think most of us, including myself, could all be devastated based on some of the things.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not just you. I mean, this is one thing, you know, in my coaching business and what my coaching business has taught me. And just because I'm a new coach, I've been sort of in this coaching space for many, many, many years. And one of the things that we learn is about the imperfections of human beings. And we teach people to embrace their imperfections. And you know, if you're religious, God, you know, God loves you exactly the way you are. And it's, you know, nature in itself is imperfect. Okay. And but on this political side and social side, we're trying to hold people to an unrealistic
Right.
standard. Okay, we're all imperfect. We all say stupid shit at one time or another. Okay,
Right.
you know, trying to sterilize us, it's not realistic, and it's not a world I want to live in. Like, I
Yeah.
like people for
People
their
people
flaws,
evolve.
their
Yeah.
imperfections. Look,
People evolve. People change. You
we're
know.
all striving to be better, but trying to be perfect again is a philosophy that what I teach in my coaching, I am opposed. I mean, we have so many insecurities and hangups from parents telling us, oh, you know, we didn't do this well, or somebody criticizing and all this stuff. And then I, as a coach, try to work to reprogram people and eliminate this emotional baggage and mental baggage that holds them back from them getting what they truly want. And then we have this society right now that is trying to blame people for anything that they do wrong and the imperfections. And I find the two, for me, conflict with my core values. You know, I'm going to do the best job I can. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Have I said
Right.
stupid shit in the past? Absolutely. Okay. But, you know, I do the best that I can. I always strive to be the best. But if I fall down, I'm okay with it. And it's taken me a very long time and a lot of work to say that I'm okay with it. Because as somebody who worked on Wall Street, I chased that perfection. Okay.
Mm.
And it did a disservice to my psyche. Okay. Always feeling that you're never good enough. You're never good enough. Constantly chasing something that is unattainable. Okay.
Right.
And this is the same concept. What they're chasing and what they're driving is unattainable. Okay, we all need to love each other exactly the way we are. Okay, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Okay, we're all people, and we all fundamentally want the same things. We want a roof over our heads. We want to feel safe in our homes and in our communities, and we want the opportunity to be able to thrive. You know, we're a culture that is built on innovation and industry. And we all put a great amount of value on our careers. And you know what is going on in New York City with all this upheaval and unrest, and preventing us from going to work, from building businesses. I mean, this is really against the core beliefs of this country. So we need to bring that back, and we need to install representatives and an administration that is going to support those values.
Right. Well, a lot of the things that are going on, I feel like a problem is that people are unwilling to reason with each other. Like, for instance, right? I am not anti-police. I support the police. However, we have to be able to be honest and say that some of those cops do bad things. You know, the problem is that a lot of people are entirely against them or entirely for them, and they cannot come to this consensus and say, you know, a lot of the cops, I know a lot of police officers, I have officers in my family, good people, they're not bad people, you know, but I grew up in the what we'll call the ghetto, right? And I encountered cops that were what we would call bad apples. You know, use racial slurs when talking to me, use racial slurs when talking about my friends, you know, and even something as simple as hopping the turnstile. You mentioned, you know, somebody hopping the turnstile. I got caught doing that in the middle of a gang fight, and I was with a few friends. I, because of how I look, was treated differently than my friends who looked different than me. So that there is a bias too that individuals have, or blatant racism in some cases. And in this particular police officer, seen as though he called my friend the N-word and he called me the S-word, you know, clearly this guy probably falls into the racist camp. I'm just gonna venture a guess, you know, that he falls into the racist camp. But he was a cop, and he had at that point the authority to determine whether or not my hopping the turnstile was a ticket, or had me in handcuffs, or if he was going to shoot me, or if he was going to beat the crap out of me. I was at his complete control. Took me into this little room where nobody can see anything, and I was very respectful. I cooperated, which I generally advise people to do, but I know that there are times that you can't. For instance, if somebody has a knee on your neck, your instinct is to fight to get them off. Doesn't matter what's happening, your instinct to survive, or somebody's punching you in the head. Yeah, and again, we're not saying all cops do this, right? I'm just talking about these situations where somebody says, well, you should comply. Well, if you're punching me in the head and you say, you know, put your hands behind you, comply, and you're punching me in the head, no, my instinct is to do this. Yeah. You know, just it's a survival instinct, and then things happen, right? So I believe that there are problems, right? I support Black Lives Matter. I support that movement. I believe there is a problem in society. When people talk to me, like, they'll say, well, more white people are killed by police officers. I don't know stats. I don't have, you know, and I don't trust them all that much. But let's, for the sake of debate, let's say, yes, okay, it's true. More white people are killed by police officers. Then we are agreeing that there is a problem. We're agreeing that there is a problem. That police officer shouldn't kill a person if there's no immediate threat or whatever. So, and again, not all cops. I'm not attacking all cops. I'm just speaking in terms of those bad apples, right? If we can all agree that there are bad apples, and you say, well, the bad apples are killing white people, and this guy says the bad apples are killing black people, this guy says the bad apples are killing Latinos, why don't we all then agree and say, let's get rid of those bad apples, including the police officers? Because that's part of the problem, that they can't say anything about the bad apple, because if they're in a bad situation, then they don't have that protection afforded to them. I'm all over the place right now. I'm sorry. I'm bouncing because I'm trying to explain the point, and it's hard. It's a hard point to make because I understand both sides.
Yeah.
And that's always a issue, trying to say I understand that we have I believe the majority of officers are good officers, and we have those few bad officers that make it real bad for those good cops. Yeah. They make life difficult.
Yeah, you know? think you're exactly right. I mean, I think that majority of the cops are good. Okay. But then you have this, you have this extreme cases and it gets put on video and broadcast to the world. Look, that should have never happened. And those cops are going to have their day in court. And, you know, they are going to be, you know, judged by a jury and they're going to get their due. And you have to trust that the legal system will handle it. Now, the way our society and our systems have gotten so corrupt, you can't really trust it. Quite honestly.
Well, we wouldn't even know about it if there wasn't video. And if there wasn't video, even with the video, there was no action until people started marching and going into an uproar. That's the problem. Every person should have been able to say that was wrong, but we, didn't.
I've never heard one person say that it wasn't wrong. I think that this is something that our country unanimously agreed on. I've never heard one person that said that what happened to George Floyd was
I could tell you of many.
Never.
He was on drugs. He was going to die anyway. He was already dying.
Those may be true facts, but he still did not deserve to die this way. Regardless of what the situation is, he did not deserve to die like that. And I have not heard anybody disagree with that. So if you did,
I have plenty of people. I could tell you all the points they've made.
I haven't one, but going back to the point is that yes, there are bad cops too. I think majority of them are good. A very small percentage are bad, but you have bad in every industry. I mean, look, we worked on Wall Street. Not everybody in Wall Street's bad. Okay. Not everybody in Wall Street broke the law. Okay. So, there's bad teachers. There's bad doctors.
Chris Rock,
crazy doctors who kill their patients. I mean,
Chris Rock,
everywhere.
Yeah. So in that capacity, like there's industries where you can't have bad apples, and that's a bit that Chris Rock says. Like you can't have a bad apple pilot that just doesn't want to land the plane.
But this is why you have processes and policies and training in order to try to weed out those bad apples. But you don't always catch them. And look, again, all of these issues are complex. I mean, then you have the unions that protect them. So, do you vote to get rid of the unions, or do you need union reform? I mean, then you have unions that protect bad teachers. So, I mean, again, back to the unions.
Rubber rooms, right? You have the rubber rooms for the teacher to hang out when they don't do their job. They hang them. They send them to a rubber room while still paying them. Now, I don't know if this policy still exists, but it used to be that if you were a bad teacher, they would just send you to this room where y'all just hanging out, doing nothing and getting paid the teacher's salary because they couldn't fire them. I think it was called the rubber room. I covered it years ago. But that's the thing with the police officers, that if you got that bad apple or that bad officer, a lot of the time they still protect them. The unions protect them. Other officers that could speak up and say, hey, and granted, in this scenario with George Floyd, people spoke up. Officers spoke up, which I had never seen. I had never seen a significant number of officers actually speak up. And I thought that's progress. That everybody can, like you said, the majority of people, and especially officers, to see them speak up was good. And this brings us to community policing, right? This is something I think can help. If the officers know the people, if the officers see the people, if they have relationships with the people, we can all at that point, get along better. If the cop that comes to my door because of a noise complaint or whatever is an officer I know, hey, you want some water? You will have a relationship with them. And I don't know how we do that in a big city. It's not like it's a small town, where it's so much easier to do. But
there actually is a program called Build a Block, which has some officers that are assigned, and then they have these sort of community meetings, and they're actually not very well attended by the community. So I don't know if it's a thing of COVID or people are just not interested,
Well, the question would be, who are those officers? Are those officers a part of the community? Are those officers somebody who commute from Long Island who don't know the community? If these, I think it's a good, it's an attempt, which is good, making an attempt.
Yeah.
But right now the division between law enforcement and people is so.
I agree. There needs to be more bridge building, but the thing is that a lot of officers can't afford to live in the districts that they police and patrol. Okay. So I know that, my district has a particularly high rent. I can't imagine somebody on a police officer salary being able to afford to live in the district. So, what, you want to have rich communities that are extremely expensive. So what, no police for them or what? Like, I mean, they just need to, do a better job of community outreach. And, there are officers in my neighborhood that I know, but I'm a very different kind of person. I know my neighbors. I actually had a birthday party a couple years ago, actually last year, and my neighbor lent me his house. Okay, I texted him and was like, "Hey, can I use your house for my birthday party?" And I wasn't really great friends with this neighbor necessarily, but he actually
they wanted cake. He wanted some cake and chips.
He actually was away for the entire month, so he wasn't even at my party. But I mean, this is the kind of relationships that I've built with my neighbors. I have,
Right.
People that work in the neighborhood. I know the restaurant owners. We all have each other's back in terms of, when I used to have a job that I went to, and if UPS delivered something, they would leave it at the store next door. These are the kind of relationships. But
Community.
I remember when I was telling my colleagues at, our previous firm that I was
Right.
going to ask my neighbor if I could use his house for my birthday party, and they thought I was insane. They're like, "He's not going to lend you his house. That's crazy."
That's how I lost my virginity. My neighbor lent me her apartment. I was,
Well, there you go.
I was a kid, community. She let me in place. I've always been grateful to her for that.
Yeah, I mean, but the reality is New York is a city where people don't really know their neighbors, and
Right.
everybody is just,
Hey, on that point that you just said, I had a woman Karen me and my son a couple of days ago, right downstairs. She Karen'd us. She came up to me and she said, "Who are you? Where are you from? And why are you here?" And I looked at her and I thought about whipping out my phone. I thought about putting her on the internet and becoming famous and destroying this woman's life, right? And then I thought to myself, let me make it a teachable moment. And I just looked at her. And she said, "I asked you a question. Where are you from and why are you here?" And I looked at her and I said, "Really? Seriously? You're doing this right now?" And she said, "Yes, seriously." And I kind of stopped and I said, "Let me ask you a question. We're in a relatively isolated area. Are you armed?" She said, "No." "Do you have a knife?" She said, "No." "What if I were to go over to you right now and grab you by the neck and choke you? What are you going to do?" And she just went pale. I said, "I am not threatening you. I am not going to do that. But you might want to consider your personal safety before you approach two men in a potentially unsafe place." That's the first thing I want to offer to you as your neighbor, because I live in this building and I'm waiting for my wife and her elderly mother to help them bring up some groceries. That's why I'm here. But the way you just approached me was very hostile, very nasty, very aggressive. You don't know me. I'm wearing a mask. I'm not worried about that camera there. If I were a bad guy like you thought I was, I could hurt you. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh my God, that wasn't smart of me, was it?" I was like, "No, it was very reckless of you. And in addition to that, I could take out my phone right now, film you, and put you on the internet as one of the Karens gone wild, and you will never get a job again." And she was just in shock. She's like, "Did I just do that? Was I just, did I have a moment like that?" I was like, "The way you spoke to us was very aggressive." very hostile. Like I felt, look, I showed her my hand. My hand was shaking because my adrenaline was up,
Yeah.
you know, and rather than trying to hurt her or destroy her reputation or anything, I took, I took a more gentle approach and tried to educate her on why not just say, hey guys, how's it going? You guys need help? Or just a different approach that isn't, who the hell are you and why are you here? I don't owe you an explanation. I'm in the building somehow, right? And this is one of my neighbors who I never met. Like you said, you go to meet all your neighbors. Everyone I see, I say hi to. If she would have walked by, I would have said good morning to her, but she didn't. She came and she attacked us because she didn't recognize us.
Yeah.
And I chose to make it a teachable moment. One, you don't know who you're approaching. I am not a bad guy, neither is my son, but what if I were? What if I were? What would you do? I said, what could you do? Can you stop me? If I try to, and she said, you're a pretty big guy. You look strong. I don't think so. Why would you approach me in a dark place like this? Call the cops. Go ask the doorman if he knows who I am. Say hi, but stay by the door. No, she came to where we were at and was and she told me she was angry. She had been stressed. I was like, I understand all that. And clearly I'm not trying to cause you trouble because I'm not filming you. I thought about it. I really thought about it because you could make me viral in the internet and that would help my brand. So I really thought about it, but I'm not that kind of a person. I'd rather talk to you and make a friend. And after that, we spent like 2 hours. I kid you not. We spent about 2 hours down there talking, just talking about everything and anything. And we got friendly.
Yeah.
But, we could have bypassed all that, me explaining all the scenarios of her getting choked, of her ending up on the internet, because you don't know what you're getting into. Why would you do that? And plus, it's not like we were doing anything wrong. We were just standing there waiting for our our family. It's just bizarre. Some people, just bizarre.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, there's a lot of very angry people, and again, in coaching, we always say, hurt people hurt.
right,
People that just are haters. They've got a lot of pain, and I know this economic climate has really triggered a lot of their pain, and it's really unfortunate, because there's a lot of hurt people that are walking around, and it's really unfortunate. I think we all need to be kinder to one another. So that is how I try to live. I try to be courteous to my neighbors. I try to always smile and say hello, and I really try to be very positive. Now, one thing that really helps me in order to get into that state is I don't watch any news. I've stopped watching news 4 months ago, and literally it's like being out of a
free,
trance.
free.
You're free. There's a sense of freedom. There's, I cannot believe the amount of propaganda that our media is manufacturing, and I don't care what news you watch, it's all of them. So
that's always been a problem, and they're very polarized. They've gone from, at some point in our life, reporting the facts to giving opinion.
Yeah,
it's no longer facts.
They're propagating a narrative, and
both sides do it. You can watch the same story on both sides and see completely different presentations of the same exact story.
Absolutely.
Tamara, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Would you like to give any closing thoughts, any how people can donate to your campaign, how people can find you? And
that would be fantastic. I have a website. It's tamara4ny.com. They can donate directly to the website, and there's a way to contact me on the site as well. And Angel, I would like to thank you for having me on your podcast. It was wonderful to see you. I know that it's been years. mean, I remember not only did we work together, but you also helped me set up my first blog when I first started writing. So
Painting the canvas. It's still out there.
it's still out there. I don't really write on it, but one day I may go back to it when the dust settles.
Got a lot going on right now.
And that's what got me the writing practice that I needed in order to write the book I wrote. So we've known each other for quite some time. And again, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for, listening with both ears. I know you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican, but we've always been respectful to one another. And, maybe that'll become a teachable moment and, we can lead by example because again, I don't want everybody to think like me because that is how you get the greatest diversity of thought is how you get the greatest innovation. So I want people to think differently, but I do want to be respected for my opinions. So, and I will do the same for others. So thank you. Thank you for your hospitality on this call. It's been wonderful.
Of course, my pleasure. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You are listening to the NYC Talking podcast. We are NYC Talking, the realest lifestyle blog ever. Please follow Angel R Talk on Twitter and Instagram. Please like NYC Talking on Facebook. www.nyctalking.com. Thanks for listening.